Alrighty, so good evening everybody and welcome to the budget workshop of March 18th. We are going to just jump right in and look at some updated information, so Superintendent Perry.
Yeah, so I'm going to draw your attention to the first link in your agenda. We're going to get to that second link in a moment, so don't go on that one. The first link is where I want you to go first. That's going to be the one that's marked revised FY20 proposed budget summary sheet as of 3/18/19. This overall now reflects the changes that were made at the last budget workshop meeting on the 11th. So what you can see here, I'm just going to run through the highlights here, so bear with me. If you want the details, you can read them yourselves, but when you look at your expenditure side, when you look at the overall expenditure increases, we're looking at an increase of 6.17% on our operating expenses. That would be an increase overall of a little over $2.4 million. Again, that includes the adult education. It also includes that summer benefit reserve that was created early on in the conversations. Remember that? We haven't really talked a lot about that, but that's in there. That's $150,000 in that particular amount. So overall, including everything, with the budget that you guys talked about last time, our operating expenses are up by 6.17% or $2.4 million. When you go down to the revenue section, again, this is understanding with our most up-to-date ED 279 or state subsidy information, which still is very much subject to change. And this also is looking at an overall estimated increase of our property tax base of 25 million, not 25,000, sorry, 25 million. With that, the impact to the total budget would be an increase of 9% on the mill or $1.08 on the mill rate. That's where last week's sort of tentative agreements wound you up. Questions over those numbers? I just want to give you the background and the tenor. I will tell you that if you go into your budget book with somewhere in that historical piece, you'll find increases of our budgets and the mill impacts over the past 10 to 15 years, so you can see that $1.08 is a little high. All right.
Any questions? Alrighty, now the second revised sheet.
In order to do that, I've got to have a conversation about the capital budget. So do we want to do a review of questions from last time first, or just jump right into the capital budget?
Let's do the questions first.
All right. So going then down, just a couple of highlights. One, I think yes, I did create a new sheet for the new questions. So if you have those as we go through the course of tonight, that's where you can click to go to new questions. But if you want to see some highlights from the March 11th meeting, I didn't actually take the time to highlight anything in yellow, so I'll just kind of cruise through here. I will highlight the first question, which is one that's been asked often, and we're still working on finalizing the numbers here, but we do have enough to give you some estimates. The question was, what would the budget increase be in order to get Gorham's per pupil expenditures to rank 5th in the 10-school pool? Can you tell us what the percent increase would be over last year to get to that $16,337 per pupil amount? So, as you know, we sent surveys to 12 schools. Budget processes are very different in each district. As of March 13th, 6 of the districts in the survey have not yet released their full proposed budget to the school board. So we're basing this on a partial pool. Of the 6 who responded, we are number 7, meaning we have the lowest per pupil cost. I suspect fully that that's going to be the case. Either we're going to be the lowest or the second to the lowest per pupil cost in Cumberland County. But again, we're trying to wait to get some more information on that. This is true even after the recent budget workshops where previously reduced items were restored, which is the last meeting. Data from the reporting districts is as follows. We have a high per pupil cost of $18,169 per student. The average of those that we have surveyed thus far is $16,519 per student. And Gorham, with our restored items, which is the budget I just reviewed just a few minutes ago, we would be at a per pupil cost of $14,667. Using the originally proposed budget, we would be at $14,154 per student. So that just tells you we're still pretty low. We're in good shape on the per pupil cost. Using FY19 information that's been provided through the survey, our per pupil cost would have to increase approximately 11% in order to be ranked 5th at $16,337 per student. So that's the answer to that question.
Sorry, as you noted,
We're still missing about 5 districts.
and all school budgets aren't the same because they account for different things in their budget. Shared with town, not shared with town.
Yep. Oh, there's all kinds
SIPs
of oranges and lemons and all kinds of things.
Schools and,
Yeah, so if you want the pure apples to apples comparison, then you use the 10 school pool data that's originally in your budget booklet because that uses the DOE figure. The Department of Education figure is consistent across all schools because they eliminate debt service, they eliminate transportation costs, and there's one other category that they eliminate so that they calculate that across apples to apples. But in the past, people had asked, okay, so just remove that figure. Let's look at total expenditures in our operating budget and divide by the number of students and make that comparison towards. Either one, we're the lowest or very close to the bottom of the list on our per pupil expenditures. You're welcome. All right. Skipping around then, let's see here. I did want to point out, the question was, can we get an updated look at classroom sizes distribution with tonight's edition, with the additions from March 11th? And the answer is yes, it's linked right there. It's also linked in your agenda as a piece of additional information. So I did go back in and adjust the class sizes based on the adjustments, the increases in staffing that you made tentatively at the last meeting. So that's linked in there. Let's see here. Question number 85, what would it take to have the modular at Narragansett ready in the fall? How much of that work is subcontracted out? Is it even possible? The short answer to that, although there's a lot of detail in there, so I encourage you to read the detail of that, the short answer is no, it's not possible to have a modular occupied for students by September 1 or when school starts the last week in August.
Then you want to jump back to 79.
What is 79?
Reworking of Narragansett.
Oh, yes, I can do that. So the other question, 79.
Kind of good lead in after.
Thank you. The question number 79 is, can the classrooms at Narragansett be reworked at all so there's space in the addition for an additional third grade classroom that was not put back in the budget at our March 11th meeting? So then the second question is also, instead of adding a third grade teacher, can we have an ed tech share at the third grade level to support the teachers? So in answer to both of those questions, the short answer is that we think we actually can rework the facilities at Narragansett Elementary School to allow for a third grade classroom to be added. The reworking would possibly require some small renovations, such as some addition of a division wall or some small kind of pieces like that. But we do think that if the school committee wants to make that a priority, we could do that within the existing budget and not impact our SIPS budget at all. These would be minor renovations. And then you could always put ed techs in 2 classrooms as well. So the answer is yes to both of those questions. Stuart.
Do we have a classroom big enough at Narragansett
So
that we
yes,
can divide? And
Yeah, so we did some hard looking today. Actually, we did, I'd say Cynthia did some hard, where are you? There you are. Some hard looking over the course of the past week. And then Norm and I and Cynthia and Hollis and Chris actually went around and did a visual scanning of everything today. And we do think that can be done. Again, with some minor costs for some, some walls and some different things. But yes, we think we can do it if we had to. All right. I think that's probably good. Is there anything else that's burning?
Any questions on there that anybody had further comments on?
Want me to answer the fund balance question? Yeah. All right. All of these question and answer documents, by the way, I am slowly posting to the website too, so the public can see them. So if members of the public are interested, if you go to our website, go under school committee, then there's a tab on the right-hand side that says budget, and I'm posting things there slowly but surely.
So, yeah, are we gonna be able to talk about the margin at all, or?
Oh, that's coming
Yeah,
up.
we'll come up.
All right, that's it for questions. So now, SIPs?
Jump into 6.
All right.
Jumping into the deep end.
Yeah, this is the deep end of the pool. So, how do I start this? I'll start it with our proposed budget that's in the SIPS budget right now, for what you saw earlier, FY20. That amount that we put in the SIPS budget was a little over, for the modular spaces at Narragansett Elementary School, it was a little over $500,000, maybe close to $600,000 that we had in the FY20 capital improvement budget for the Narragansett site work for modular classrooms. Now, I'm gonna point you to the phase-in drawing, okay? So I'd like you to click on that so everybody can see the phase-in drawing. You might wanna download it so you can turn it so you can see it facing the right way, but it's right there. And again, this is gonna be posted to the public site.
When did this change from the January 23rd meeting? Because this is different than what we saw in January.
So this is a more formal, but if you look at the January 23rd meeting, it's the same thing, it's just hand sketching, that's all. It's the same colorations and the
So
same
next year, we're
total.
gonna have 2 modules in there again.
I'll go through this, okay? So, what we're looking at, the yellow in this picture is the existing Narragansett building, elementary school. What we've done here is we've projected out over the course of several years what the needs would be if we were to shift attendance zones in FY '21 and then look to put additional, funnel all of our growth towards Narragansett that goes all the way through to the latest enrollment projection of 28-29 is what we have for total enrollment. And so we're projecting here, what would we need to get us through that growth period, okay? And then we've kind of sliced it out and color-coded it by year, what we would need to do, again, based on that overall enrollment projection. So what we're looking at here in the blue would be the first phase, okay, which is FY '20, that we would need to get constructed, the site work and the modulars put in place for FY '20. That would be done over the course of next year. So when I said earlier that we would not anticipate student bodies being in these, that's what I mean. We would not anticipate student bodies being in here because we would not have this constructed in time for September or August, because that's only a few months away when you're talking building time. This blue site would be constructed over the course of the summer and fall, and then interior work would be done over the course of the winter, so that blue site were fairly well ready to go by the spring of next year. Then we would start phase 2, which is the green. Okay? The green would be an additional modular and a cafeteria, which is actually 2 modulars sort of put together. So when you look at the blue, we're looking at a total of 3 modular buildings, but there's only 4 actual classroom spaces in those modular buildings because one of those modular buildings is going to be used to create bathrooms and to create electrical and networking closets and all the infrastructure spaces that need to go in there to make this full thing operational as we build it out. So it creates like a hub, okay? So that blue section would be ready by the spring of 2021. Next year, right? No, spring of 20. And then when we get ready to do, we would be able to do the spring work for the other 2 buildings, the green, and have that ready for August, late August or September of the next school year, right? Which is the year that we're going to shift attendance zones. So that's why we need both of those things in place in order to shift attendance zones, because we need those spaces, the blue and the green, in order to make that possible, okay? Everybody with me so far? All right, now, keep in mind again that the site work that we had budgeted for this in FY '20 was just under $600,000. That was really primarily for blue because we could budget for the green in the next fiscal year, okay? Now when we look at the blue, we just got some new information this weekend about the estimated costs for the site work. And like everything else in the construction world, it seems, costs are just, they're nuts, okay? So I'm gonna minimize that. I'm gonna go to the other, I'll point you in the direction of an updated, it's a new modular estimate. If you could click on new modular estimate. This is for phase 1 only, just the blue parts of what I showed you. Okay? So it went from what we were anticipating of just under 600,000 to now about, it's about 1.1 million. Okay? So as you might imagine, that has some impacts on our SIPS budget. So then I'm going to draw you, as we're in the shock phase, let me draw you to the next one, which is the updated SIPS budget. So if you could click on that. So I've asked Norm to rework the SIPS budget because if we know that we need these modular spaces in order to do the transition of attendance zones in FY '21, and we know we need these modular spaces over the course of 2 fiscal years, that means we have to do phase 1 in FY20, which means we have to have $1.1 million just for that alone. So when you look at that, what he's basically done with the SIPS budget is he's zeroed out almost everything else that was in the original SIPS budget. We're looking at now just doing that phase 1 of the modular spaces at Narragansett. And we did keep in $30,000 for fire inspection compliance because we absolutely have to do that as well. So when you look at next year's SIPS budget, in order to make that modular space happen, those are the only 2 things that we could do in the SIPS budget, and we still added a little over $100,000 in the SIPS budget from what you saw before. Now,
Any questions so far? Okay. And just an FYI, it was this weekend, but we just had a very quick conversation in finance earlier tonight in which we saw these numbers, so we just saw these numbers tonight as well in finance.
and we're getting information as quickly as we can to you. I mean, these are estimates, and I think what we're finding is that the market, the construction market is a little bit nuts right now. And, you know, the things that we thought were one cost are entirely, you know, a very different cost. Okay? So.
I do have a question
Yeah.
before you go on. So the first estimate that we were building off of,
Yes.
was that like a detailed estimate or just a
It's
guess?
a
Yeah.
general estimate.
It was general estimate, we didn't have the engineering detail, so now we have more engineering detail.
Yeah.
Like Shiv with Heather, for example, the connector is 3 times as large as the one that is at the village.
Yeah.
And to get it, so the costs are just, you know, incremental. So that's that.
Right.
Because remember, this is only the site work and those kinds of things. The actual cost of the modules, the lease of those modular spaces is in the operating budget separately from SIPs.
Right.
Because those are leased spaces.
But that's not in this budget, because that's FY
It was in
21.
our budget.
It's in FY20's budget.
The lease payments?
I think we have one in the lease at least,
Right,
yes.
because we were gonna have one ready for next year, so we had one in our budget.
We had one that we were talking about potentially, but that changed when we had the January conversations between the time that we got the NESDEC original projections had us, I think probably another 200 students more than what we wound up with. And when we changed those, we went from we went to a finance committee meeting where we had one set of numbers, we went to a workshop where we had another set of numbers, and then I think the next day after that, the numbers changed, and we had to talk about that again, which we did in the January, I think it was the February 26th meeting as a school committee workshop meeting is when we talked about the revised numbers. And when we did that, I shared those revised pieces and the fact that we would not be able to get students in those buildings at that time. But I did not make a one-for-one connection between that change and the 3rd grade being at 2 estimated classrooms at that point in time. And so I did not say those words at the February meeting. I did review the change in the project at that time, but I didn't say those words. And so if people did not make that connection, I will right here apologize for that. But that was the plan that we laid out at the February 26th workshop meeting with the school committee as a whole. Okay? So those information was there.
I don't remember that either. Hearing that, like, at all. I have, January 23rd, we met with Norm and did our facilities long-term plan in the January workshop. And I make little stickies in my meetings, and my notes say how crazy it was. We thought that the NESDEC numbers were huge, we were gonna need these
Right.
modulars, but, you know, the first year, we'd only need a few of them. And we are anticipating $500,000 in the SIPs to get the first 3 modulars done. This is needed as soon as possible in order to get the project started and completed by September. After that, I don't
So the
ever
numbers changed.
remember I remember the numbers changed, because I remember we all were in shock.
And that was the January, was that the January meeting?
That was the January
It was
meeting.
February 26th that I shared the new updated sort of, it's the same drawings, it was just a different discussion around the phasing of those things. And that was in the February 26th workshop meeting. And again, I did not draw that out as a clear piece, and I will take the credit for that, or whatever that is, take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Because I did not draw that out at that time. But at that point in time, that was what it was. The NESDEC numbers had shown us that we could put 2 classrooms into that 3rd grade classroom and still meet the mid-range targets, and so that's how the budget changed, and that's how the SIPS monies changed. Because when you look at your originally proposed budget in here, in this
Yeah.
big 270
Yeah.
odd page document, that shows only 2 classrooms at the Narragansett 3rd grade level because of those changes in the NESDEC numbers. Those were made prior to you seeing those budget booklets. I talked about it in the budget booklet. I did not draw it out separately in the February workshop.
And I guess, aside from not making the direct connection about the 3rd grade class,
Mhm.
I guess I just feel, and I don't know if anyone else feels this way, I think Jen, I'm hearing her say that she is, but I guess I still thought that we were going to be having a modular for September.
The modulars are gonna be in place, they just will not be functional at that time, because we have to do all the interior work and the wiring that's associated, and the plumbing that's associated with the bathrooms.
Right.
And I think, again, I mean, I guess, if that wasn't clear, I'll own that, and I apologize, but I can't change that at this
Right.
point.
Yeah.
So I can't go any other direction at this point.
Right.
I was under the impression, I left that meeting not thinking we were having a portable for next year for Narragansett. I remember having the conversation that we're in the same spot we were with the village portable, of not being able to get that ready. But because this project was so much more than just a single portable, we wouldn't even have that ready for November, December, January, whenever it finally got occupied.
Right, that's what I presented in February.
Yeah, if I had that understanding at all, I would have spoke up immediately, because I've known for 4 years now that we were gonna run out of spaces, because every year we lose another space at Narragansett, whether it's another tech lab or another classroom that has to be combined. So we've known for a while, so I would have said something if I.
This growth has been happening for quite some time. There's no finger pointing here, there's no blaming, or at least if
No,
there is,
but-
point it in my direction because I wasn't clear, and I'm fine with that. What I'm trying to say is that we really shouldn't spend a lot more time on that because we can't change it at this point.
Well, I think in the future, it is important to talk about, because in the future, I think it's really important that if we give a direction as a school committee, that we're all on board and we all know what's happening.
I felt I had that direction February 26th, and I guess I did not. So that's clarity of communication that needs to be better, I guess. Moving forward, though, we're still in the pickle that I just described a second ago around the SIPS budget and the need for that to move forward and what the implications are for that. And we're also in a situation, although I think that, whether you consider it good news or not, that Cynthia has worked very diligently to discover a manner in which we could, if we wanted to, and again, that's the school committee's decision. If you wanted to add a 3rd grade classroom to Narragansett for next year, you can do that without a modular classroom. So,
I think it would be very good for us to do the vote again, because I know when that happened, you weren't aware that it was not gonna be ready either.
My vote was simply because I just figured out that there was not going to be a modular.
Right.
Not saying it
As-
didn't happen, I might have
Right.
misunderstood the
So
situation.
right. I think it would be good for us to be able to do that vote again, now
Well,
that we're all
we
clear
will,
about it.
once we get through the next
Right.
round, I'm assuming, because we're gonna go through the addition tallies tonight, is that
Mhm.
correct? And then there's an opportunity for anyone to bring anything up that they want to revisit, and if 4 people want to revisit it, then it gets revisited.
correct.
Do we have a cost yet on, an estimate on those changes that would need to be done at Narragansett?
Yeah, so that's in this updated SIPS budget demonstrates that, and actually, if you go back up to the top of your agenda, there were 2 proposed budget summary sheets there. One shows the reflections of things made, the changes that you guys made on March 11th. That second one shows the changes made to reflect the SIPS budget changes that we're suggesting to move forward with the SIPS changes at Narragansett Elementary School. When you do that, your total expenditure operations budget goes up to 6.61% increase, which is about $2.5 million. And the impact at this point would be about an increase of 9.85% on the mill, or $1.19 on the mill, with those 6 changes calculated in there on top of what you changed last time on the March 11th meeting. So yes, that homework has been done.
So that 1.1, that million, that includes everything we need for
For the blue.
work on next, for the blue, including the changes inside the school to accommodate.
That I think
The
is
school's gonna be out of the
Maintenance budget.
maintenance, projects budget.
Okay, Yeah,
So
that was,
that's
that was
not
my
gonna be done
question,
under
was
SIPs.
the projects to get that extra classroom.
That would be
What was
under
the cost
the
of
separate, that would be under another budget, but which we feel we can do within that.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're not, we can make the room for the extra classroom without adding to the budget
Correct.
beyond this.
The teacher.
This is completely separate, right? Well, the teacher would be a position
Yeah.
that you'd have to add to the budget to make that happen. But for SIPs, that's just the modular site work and everything associated with the modulars,
And
well, except the lease.
just to piggyback on that, so we have enough furniture and movable
We
stuff?
can make that work within the existing budget, yes.
What about,
Cost of 2 ed techs.
Roughly equivalent to one teacher, I
That's
mean,
what
roughly,
the question's gonna be, is
yeah.
So-
doing that would be the same as the other teacher.
would we need to add any other support services or schedule? Are you gonna be able to accommodate?
So I had a large conversation with the K through 5 team, I'm glad you brought that up. So the K through 5 team and I met last Thursday. We had a really good conversation about that, and it looks like even with, we calculated, I wouldn't say worst case scenario, most expensive scenario, how's that? Which would include another third grade at Narragansett Elementary School, and we felt we could do that within the existing budget as it exists, not having to add anything to allied arts. I think there was a little bit in curriculum that had to be adjusted, which was a question on your chart there, so. But that's been accounted for in these changes.
Cynthia, what is this space that Narragansett that might be a classroom?
So you
It's a little bit of a domino effect. The short answer to it is we're taking a couple programs or support services that now are in larger spaces, and we're going to consolidate them in a classroom, a larger classroom that we can put a full wall divider, and they'll both have separate doors. It will require some other domino moves, but that's the short answer.
So then the divider would be for the support services to become basically two groups in one room, and the
Yep.
additional classroom would be in a large enough
What I-
classroom.
What I'd like to suggest would be that if the school committee feels strongly about splitting that third grade into a third grade, that, we could come back with a little bit more formal plan, but I do know it's possible, and we could be more detailed about that right now, but I don't want Cynthia to say something that we actually can't do just yet, so I think that we can definitely do it. It can be done. The impacts for that would be in the support services, but I think it would be a positive piece because there's some domino pieces that we would have to move that are a little too complicated and I don't want to get into tonight because it would take us down a nice little rabbit hole. So, but it can be done and it can be done well.
I understand the rabbit hole piece, Heather. I would just like to know if we do have a discussion about it, that this would be a good environment for a classroom.
I'm
You know what I
hoping that
mean?
if Cynthia believes that, I believe that, then you guys can kind of get on board with that a little bit at least until we have more details.
Well, my concern when first hearing it was that we were taking an existing classroom
No.
and putting the partition, so the fact
Well-
of using the, but no,
You
but,
sort of are, but it's a ripple.
right,
Yeah.
but no, I was thinking taking one full-size classroom
No,
with
No, we are not.
the number of students we have and putting a partition and then having them in smaller, so the fact of using the resource rooms and that makes a lot more sense to me, because in my mind, that's where I jumped to, and I was a little concerned.
We would not do that.
Right.
Right, no, I didn't think so, that's why I just, well, that was my initial concern.
And just to add clarity, the space that we would free up in doing that is a full classroom space. It's comparable to our other first grade classrooms down in that east wing.
Any other questions? Okay, Jen?
Well, just on, since we're on the topic of third grade, the numbers for the village, are those also 26 per classroom, or is that?
So where are you looking at?
Which
I'm
one? The
looking at
K-5 proposed enrollments?
K-5 hybrid model.
The most updated one,
Yes.
under new? Yes?
Revised and
No,
updated.
that's the,
I believe that's it.
that's
for
the odd one with
Yes,
the projecting
weird
19.
19 kids.
So, but do you, If, I'm sorry, I can't.
No, that's all right.
Okay, so what you have to understand, okay, that gets back to, remember the whole disappearing act of 19 students and the addition of 19 students?
That's what I just wanted
That's
to
why
be
those
clear
are
about.
marked in red. So when you see red here in this one, I updated that, so we're seeing both of those. I had it in 2 spreadsheets before, but now I've sort of collapsed them onto one so you can see them all at the same time. So start at the top of the page if you could. So you can see that Great Falls K goes across Village K, Narragansett K, right? Nothing there. First grade, looks good. First grade, all the way across, good. Second grade, looks good all the way across. Third grade, there's some fun things happening in third grade, right? So third grade at Great Falls, that's where NESDEC totals were off by, they had 12 students missing somehow, okay? So what I did there is, when you see that 18, 19, 19, that's 113. So I put the 101 in the left-hand side, that's the NESDEC original number, but the reality is 113, okay? Same thing with Village in the third grade. NESDEC, I don't know how, they added 19 students in that circumstance, so I don't think the 26 is ever gonna happen because 19 students are missing.
Okay. I
So it's
see.
actually 59,
Okay.
so you look at the right-hand side, and that's the actual numbers, okay? That's,
So in order for the NESDEC numbers to be right, we'd have to have 19 students move in at the third grade level
at
Into
Village,
Village.
at Village.
right.
Yes, magically
Okay.
appear.
And it's not gonna
Okay,
happen.
all right, so we're most likely looking at those 19,
The
20.
19, 20 numbers.
Okay.
Then you want to just jump down for
Oh, the same
fifth,
thing,
'cause
same
the
thing with
opposite
fifth
can
grade.
happen.
It's sort of the opposite happened, yeah, they lost 19 students there somehow. And so I don't think that that's gonna actually happen, so that's why you see.
And those numbers are the
Those
91.
reflect the 91.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
It's like still. These unupdated SIPs,
I think I've gone through all my stuff,
okay.
all you.
Had the conversation regarding, which, to your point, Kyle, when we finished through the 2 pieces that we have for the addition, proposed additions are the only 2 that we have left. Bring up first, which is the SIPs increase, which that number hasn't been adjusted.
No, it needs
Is
to
it?
be adjusted, no, I need to adjust that. Let me do that now.
So just to be clear, these additions are currently in the budget? This list?
Yes,
They're in there?
This is in there, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's increase.
oh, the increase, I see what you're saying. Hollis, can you calculate that?
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure how.
The SIPs increase with the new numbers.
Yes.
I had an original 522 in there, but I need to add in the other piece.
Yeah, it went up 170,000. So you want the grand total of the
Yes,
six?
please.
So,
No, I want the grand total of the increase in
all right,
SIPs.
677,830.
Thank you. 77830. There you go.
Which is now in the adjusted budget and the FY '20 proposed budget summary, the second one that we were looking
Second
at.
one, yes.
Because if you scroll, and again, just for everybody in looking at this, as you scroll down, because it's multiple pages, it's by meeting what we've done, when the changes were made after each one. So you'll see at the very bottom, Phase 1 estimates, Sebago Technics increased the SIPs, increase by 170,830. So that is in this, that last summary report that Heather provided to us. So this full amount, to your point, Kyle, the 677,830, as of right now, is in that budget. So I guess that's where we'll start. Comments, questions?
Is it too late to explore bonding the
I'm gonna let you guys field that one.
Narragansett project?
Which you guys.
Yes.
The finance, we already talked.
Short answer is yes.
Short answer is
Long
yes.
answer, just say yes, that's good for me. And then, so, I mean, so we've taken off the fixing or redoing the bathrooms at Narragansett?
Yes, everything except for, the only two things in your SIP's budget at this point in time would be the modular site work, that's required to get those modulars done in Narragansett for the blue, and the fire inspection.
And so are we going to be able to, with just the 2 new bathrooms at Narragansett, are we gonna be able to handle the new students that we are proposing to put over there?
So remember, there's another bathroom that's gonna be added
That's what
into
I'm asking,
the.
is that gonna be enough? 'Cause
I believe so. There's actually, if you look at the detail of the new bathrooms, there's a set of students' bathrooms and staff bathrooms. I think there are at least 3 or 4 stalls in each boys and girls bathroom. So there's actually, per plumbing code, it was actually for the build out of that modular, so additional phases. So down the road, it's still nice, it would be nice to get those additional, but for initial occupancy, you get more than enough bathrooms to be required.
So we're not really adding students, though, we're just splitting the class.
no, but when we open up, we're gonna be moving
Right.
students over, so
Next year.
we haven't been able, we
There's bathrooms
didn't,
in there, isn't there?
yeah,
And
but
the
we
portable.
haven't been able to fix those Narragansett bathrooms
Right.
in how many years it's been on there, and now we're going into another year with no capital improvement budget.
Yes.
So I mentioned this at the finance committee meeting, but I strongly believe that SIP should be its own budget and not part of the operational budget. I think it clouds our discussions and it doesn't allow, it gets us arguing about 1%, 1.5%, 2% of a budget in order to save SIP projects, and I think that those things should be bonded when they need to be, and the town needs to vote on, and/or the town council needs to include it in their plan to upkeep our town properties, which the schools are, and the schools are a reflection of the town. And so for me, it really clouds it. I know that's a bigger discussion than just here, but I wanted to say it and say it publicly. That's my position. It was my position last year. It's why I have a hard time with the budget process in general, because I think it makes it confusing for the people in the town who get they get a yes or no vote, and it's hard for them to know. There may be a very good reason why the percentage increase is high, because there's a very important project in there, but they don't get to see that. It's just a yes or no, and they see the number, and it's very hard to relate that. And that's why I still think that it needs to be separated.
Yeah, and I would add, if I could, that in our initial discussions, one of the things that we talked about was, I mean, the reason that this is in the SIP's budget to begin with is because we had some very specific guidance from the town council that said they did not want to see, last year that said they did not want to see anything, this bonded, right?
Mhm.
So that's why we've embedded it into the SIP's budget to begin with. At this point in time, and that was done because there was the high school project, the whole bigger picture, right? And at this point in time, the high school project, the high school project is still kind of out there. We have the needs of the elementary school that are out there. And I think we have to have a larger conversation as a community about these capital projects, but the problem is that this particular piece is not, we have to have this in place in order to meet that FY21 shift in attendance zones, which we have to do if we're going to be efficient in how we sort of expand and deal with our expanding K-5 enrollments that are here now. And so we can't really delay at this point, it's too late to ask for bond, although we can try to word the question in the referendum itself to leave the possibility of phase 2 being something that's bonded in addition to something else. But what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna try to word that question, because we have to have a referendum question at the June meeting for this purpose. So we're gonna try to word that so that it encompasses the whole phase 1 and 2, okay? So that total amount is there, but it leaves it open so that phase 1 is clear that it's paid for out of our operating budget, but phase 2 could be opened up for the possibility of bonding in another larger package if we wanted to do that, or if we could do that, or if that's even an option. We just can't wait on this.
And phase 2, that's the
Green.
next year part
It's
on
agreed.
Yes.
SIPs,
green.
500,000. I'm sorry, I'm talking about money.
Oh, on the
SIP
SIP's budget? Yes.
How confident are we in that $500,000 number?
It's about half the work, right? I mean, it's,
Yeah,
or
they're not
even
even
less.
half the work, so I'm meeting with Sebago Technics tomorrow, and I'm gonna ask them to try to put more solid numbers to those.
Because half the work doesn't mean necessary, I mean,
Half the
by
hours.
next year, it could be 750,000 for half the work.
Yeah, 2 of those classrooms, the concrete work will be happening in this initial phase. It's the cafeteria next year.
The bigger part, yeah.
So my concern is that, again, we're spending everything on the SIPS budget, which on one, I mean, we're making a commitment to this. This was always our plan, is to move forward with it. And by adding all the teaching and, support positions back in and spending this money on, the SIPS budget basically on Narragansett and nowhere else, I mean, that's the route we're going. So other things are gonna fall by the wayside. And like if we don't bond next year for the phase 2, we're gonna be in the same situation where the whole SIPS budget, so that's 2 solid years of the only capital improvement we're doing in the district is at Narragansett.
And it's in modules.
Right. So, I mean, I agree with what Bill's saying, that we have to separate these major capital projects out of the operating budget. That's not what the budget is for. And we keep coming back with these big increases because we're trying to do everything out of an operating budget. That should not be, it's not operating, I mean, the teachers are, or the positions are, but the building is not. So, and if that's the route we're gonna go in, and we decide as a school committee, as a district, that's where we're going, then we don't really have a choice about other options.
And I think this year, we kind of don't really have much in choices in whether we do this or not, but in the future, it's a conversation we need to be having with the town council as to how do we make this work. We've had, tried to have conversations, and we've had little conversations back and forth for many, many years, trying to see how to do it. We haven't been able to find a way. I think it's something, in finance, the superintendent said something about maybe putting together a joint task force with the members of the school committee and members of the town council. Maybe that's something that we could do, but I think it's a plan that we are gonna be having further conversation with the town manager and town council about how do we deal with this overall. We do know what the kind of the long-term issues are, not only with the school buildings, but with municipal buildings. And how are we gonna deal with that? Is it gonna be through bonding? Is it gonna be through, how are we gonna deal with that situation? So that's, hopefully we'll be able to have a conversation and have something set up, so next year we aren't doing this again.
And we're not the only department in the town that needs to have this conversation. I mean, you can't grow a town and not grow an infrastructure to support it. So, we just happen to be the biggest
Piece of it.
piece of it.
Yeah, the most visible, yes.
Any further questions or conversation? Everybody like to straw poll on adding the 677, 830? Not adding it, keeping it in the budget.
So how do we vote if we're
Yes,
supporting
we
it?
just increased the,
Well, but that is already in that summary
It's been updated.
piece. It's been updated, so it is in that summary piece of it.
It's in the 9%.
but it wasn't in the original.
Wasn't in the first one.
No, it was not.
We started to discuss.
Although we did treat SIPs separately from our general operating budget, so that's still in
Is there further discussion you want to have, Bill? Nope.
So really all we're doing is increasing the SIPS budget by 100,000 because it was already in there.
there. Yeah,
It's
whatever that
$170,000.
$100,000, 170.
170,000.
170, 830.
But it's also no longer a source that we can reduce the budget.
It
Just
is
gonna
correct.
say that if we get to town council and they say, cut $600,000,
We can't cut that.
Correct.
we can't touch this anymore.
Well, I don't know what town council wants to see anyway, it's just a little weird way to do it, I guess.
Yes, they didn't want us to touch SIPs, I guess. So any further discussion? Okay, thumbs up is keeping it at the number that it is, 677,830, which is included in the updated summary budget that we have, budget sheet. Thumbs down is to remove it out of that piece.
This is just a protest vote, Norm.
I got room in my mind for these kids.
Be careful, there'll be a revenue stream coming at you.
You know, I'm a bus driver to get them up there, though.
I will say, I'm saying no for a different reason than Bill is, though. I think it should be more. That's another year we're not investing in our schools. We're not even investing in Narragansett. We're investing in modular buildings.
Yep.
Which leads us to the next one, a new modular lease at Narragansett. Clarification as to what this is the actual
This is the
lease
actual
payment
cost of the lease payment.
for the building itself.
For
One,
one of the buildings?
yeah.
One that
Because
we've already talked about, that we,
The blue.
right.
But isn't the blue 3 modular?
So it is, so that was, I think, originally, what did we do with that? Oh, no.
In the
Did we have
original
just one-
budget, I originally had $26,000 for one lease, one two classroom portable in the budget, and that was based on last year's, or current year's, pricing. And I kept that in there because we're not sure whether it's occupancy or not, what the date of delivery would be. So we kept the whole amount, that whole 26,000 in the budget. It's been there all along.
And the original discussion with Schiavi was, is that they're going to charge us the lease for those that we were intending to use.
So are we gonna be able to have them delivered, and when would the lease, if we're not gonna be able to have students in there, when would the lease kick in?
Once they deliver,
So now you're
So now
actually
we're
talking
through.
about more money.
we're talking more money. And because for that discussion there was, I don't think they were including the bathrooms in the core area. And I assume we're gonna have to use those core areas. Because we're not gonna use any of them this year.
So that is roughly a third of what we need total, so you need 26 times 3, right? Yeah.
So it'd be 78,000.
This goes from bad to worse.
Can we work some kind of deal with them since they're not being used by students?
Well, we got the buildings. I mean, they don't care.
Before they said we have to pay to students right now.
Yeah, that's good, that's when they knew they were getting at least one out of us.
Is it something we could go back to them and
Yeah,
we tell them we have one in the budget and see what they, I mean, going from 26 to 78, with everything else to Kyle's point. I think we need to see if there's something else that we can do with that. Me personally, I'm not ready to vote on that piece of it. I think we need to try to explore to see if we can get it, do anything.
Well, what's your option though if you don't? I mean, because,
Then we'd have to add all 3 of them in.
yes, so you're
Which I
either
don't wanna
talking
do.
all or nothing, right? Okay. So, I mean, we can find that out and come back to the next meeting with that figure. Is that what you're asking?
To see if there's something, because it pretty much, it sounds like it is an all or nothing.
Yeah, I believe it is, yeah.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, but as a discussion point, going back to what Kyle just said, exactly, we as a school committee committed to making the growth at Narragansett, and this is what it's gonna cost us. I mean, if we don't do this, what's gonna happen? Our plan that we all agreed to was to redistrict our students and put them at Narragansett. I would also not like it to be $78,000, because I know that means that something else is gonna get cut, but we need them. The kids aren't going anywhere.
right, the only thing I'm saying that I'm not comfortable in voting on is, I'd like to see if we have to vote on 78, or if we can get that number down. Knowing that we're gonna have to either, it'd be 70, the vote would be either 78 or nothing, because we couldn't piecemeal it.
Yeah,
But if there's a chance that we could keep that at 26 and not, because we're not actually having students in there, which was the initial conversation with them, and say, listen, we'll pay for that one as we discussed before. That's a lot better than putting all 78,000 into it this year's budget. So I'm not comfortable until Norm can have that conversation, and he may come back and say, no, they want all three. And then we have the discussion there. To your point, this is where we were going.
Are they the only company that does this?
There's one or two others.
Is there any way to,
We can put a feeling out there.
And are they aware that long-term, we're looking at between 10 and 12 portables?
Yeah, yes, they've seen the
Okay.
phasing plan.
That's why they were willing to have the conversation earlier.
Yeah.
And if they still know that we're going down that road.
They might be willing.
I guess in my
Can we
mind, I
ask-
just see it as, I'm voting to make it either 78 or 62 or 50, whatever it is, I'm gonna say, let's put it in. It just seems more effective to say, put your thumbs up to say, we will pay for whatever modulars they tell us we need to pay for of the three. You know what I mean? Like, to be efficient and not come back to the same topic of, now it's only 60,000 doing.
My only concern with that is now they have the school committee saying that regardless of what number they come back with, they're gonna approve it. So negotiating wise, there's.
We can have this number easily for you by Monday, it's one conversation. I think ultimately you're right, Kate,
Yeah.
because you've already kind of backed yourself into a corner there. But I think it would be good to have that conversation really quick, get you an actual number, and then you know what you're talking about.
Well, I think if we can't afford the portable or the modular, then you have to question whether we can afford the whole project. Like, you can't, if you're not gonna have them there to be occupied next year, then why are we spending $700,000 to get the site work done? If we aren't gonna willing to spend the extra 100,000 to put the buildings on it. I mean, it's not like we can phase it in any more than we are already doing.
Any more than you're already
I
doing.
think
That's
we're
right.
all just saying that we're gonna do it, or hopefully to do it, but if we can reach out to maybe another company and see,
Well, I
like,
think
if they
Norm's
know
already
what.
kind of vetted, I didn't
But
take
if
a job.
we know that another company knows where, these are a lot of portables, I mean, if they can't maybe give us a deal, then maybe we do need to go to another company that will give us a deal, knowing that we're not even using them next year.
I want to vote for a number that's actually going to be in the budget, that's all I'm.
I can have to you by Monday, so we can do it.
I would like to wait as well.
Okay. So are we comfortable with waiting?
I'm fine with
Yep.
it.
Okay, got it. We'll wait till the next meeting. All righty. So that gets us through all the proposed additions. And opens us back up for other items. I know, and there's I'm trying to find it. Technology was a question that had come up. Did you want to jump into that before we go back and, so look at technology and look at that as a new piece instead of jumping right back into things we've already discussed, or do we want to jump back into previous conversations?
Cool. So I have a few items that I might just throw out there to help with the context of the situation as well. So remember when we first started this process, I had told you about the fact that there was some regional service center monies in our subsidy that I had not included in our subsidy because I wasn't sure if they would stay there. Got some really solid information at this point now that those monies, regardless of what happens with the legislation, assistant administration, those monies will be there for next year. And so there's $153,000 in subsidy that I can add to the budget in terms of revenue that will help offset costs. No, that's not exactly what it helps, right? Every little bit helps a little bit. So that's one piece.
And that's not in our most recent.
That's not in your most recent.
So I'd like to start the process of discussing, and maybe it's not feasible to do for this budget process, but for lack of a better term, a usage fee or a impact fee for technology to help offset the cost and make the technology program not self-sustainable, but more sustainable, so that we have revenues coming in. If we're basically loan laptops to all of our students from 7th grade on, then I think that those families who have laptops, that they should pay a fee for the use of those laptops, and that will, over years of collecting that money, will allow us to replenish the technology in a timely manner. It's something that's not a unique idea. There's other school systems that do it. And that number could go up or down based on the needs of the district. But it's a way of putting the members of the district who have students who are using the technology benefit from it, and it doesn't put a burden on the people who, the families who are not using that technology. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Obviously, there have to be some means test where maybe students who qualify for the student lunch or something, those families would be exempt from the fee. But again, given the realities of our budget, and I think the desire for most to continue to have technology play an important role in our education, this is a way maybe to reduce some of the budget costs and keep a robust technology program in the school system at the same time.
So that would be a conversation that would start where, at the policy level?
Well, there's certainly some policy implications there. I would say that that wouldn't be a bad place to start it, because I think that right now, I mean, our policies right now, we offer one-to-one technology basically for students in grades 6 through 12 at this point in time. Our internet policies and some other of our policies, I'm not sure they'd have to be changed per se. If we were to change that, we probably would need to be transparent with the public and put something like that in a policy. So again, policy would be a good place to start that conversation. I do think, Bill, I mean, I'm not dismissing your idea at all. I think it's worth having some significant conversation around. But I'm not sure it would be done in time for this coming fiscal year. As you
That's why I said maybe it's not something that impacts this budget, but I do want to start, we're talking about the budget. So,
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
it's a way, it's an idea that came up. Maybe it is feasible to get it in this budget, probably not, but I just wanted to throw it out there.
Could we
And-
put that, we put it on pause for 1 year? I mean, and just save 250,000 for 1 year and just start the next.
Put one on pause.
Put
The purchase of the
lease,
high school.
Purchase 250,000 on pause for a year.
So what I would suggest, what I would suggest, if you're interested in considering that, and I think, you know, Dennis, if you wanted to, would you like to share your thoughts on that particular piece, or you want me to?
It doesn't mind. Either way, it's fine. One thing I want to make sure everybody knows, and Finance Committee members probably know this more than the others, there is a fee currently from 6 through 12, which is the laptop protection plan. We don't call it insurance in public because that'll upset insurance people. But laptop protection plan is $25. So I don't want you to think, so if you go to a fee, then it's going to have to be more than that, or it's going to have to be added to that, or whatever, however you want to approach that. And I think that's a great, and I think policy is, I think it was the Finance Committee that settled on the number, but there is a policy in place that I believe that follows that law.
Yep.
My thought on this is very simple. We're not gonna buy new laptops for the high school students. I like to cut through all the foolishness, ladies and gentlemen. So we're not gonna buy new laptops for the high school students. I get that. And everybody in this room knows that. So let's just say it out loud and move forward. What I would suggest strongly is that we leave some of the money that's in the budget now for high school laptops, because the effect of the high school students is really minimal. Really, it's a minimal laptop. The laptops are in decent shape. We've kept them in decent shape. We repair them appropriately. They'll be fine for another year easily. The effect is not the high school, it's the elementary schools. They're using, would you like to pull one of those out? They're using these.
Did you bring visuals?
She brought a visual for you to see.
I use it every
There are
day.
810 of
I
these.
actually selected the ones that
Are in
are
good shape.
in
They're
working
looking pretty-
condition.
they're
Yeah,
looking pretty
these,
good shape.
Those look better than some of the ones that are in use, trust me.
the ones I pulled first didn't turn on, so I had to go back to the cart and get working ones.
Look, it came right on.
So, here's my issue, and I get that, I've been sitting here, I get it. The problem is we started MEA testing today. And then a couple times a year, we have to do this other thing, which was Star 360, that might change to something else next year, but we still have to do an online test. Testing on that device that's sitting in your laptop, or sitting, the two of you are using right now, is, well, it's a gamble. And the odds are not good that you're gonna be successful, that it's gonna work and it's gonna stay working. So my suggestion is that you not take the entire, I don't have the number exactly in front of me, Hall, so I could probably find it pretty quickly, $260,000, I think it's $260,000. You take 200,000 out of that, we can easily double the amount of Chromebooks we have in the elementary school and cut our testing time in half. And we'll use the Chromebooks everywhere else too. But the testing time, I read the schedules that the principals put out, and I choke on them because it's just too much, it's too much time. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. Five weeks of interruptions, 5 weeks of trying to finagle sharing between classrooms. I literally have a schedule that says, Mrs. Sadenka's class, you're going to give 4 of your Chromebooks to Mr. Henry's class, Mrs. Stanley's class, you're going to, for a whole week of time, so not only are they without their devices during their testing, but also there's an impact when the other grade levels are testing as well, because we have to do sharing across. We can't rely, the devices that I even brought today are the best of the MacBooks that we have, and it's just not reliable. To wait 15 minutes for all students to have their devices turned on and working is not a good use of time. And as they die, as Dennis mentioned, we can't replace them. And Joanne is pulling from all of the current carts, which probably have 12 devices. They went from 25 to maybe 12, but is pulling from the carts to replace classroom laptops. So those are diminishing on a daily basis.
And for Village, it's equally, it's 4 weeks just for MEA testing with all the Chromebooks in the school, including library media. We have to pull those. And so that's only for MEA. Then you add on the other testing to where they have to share, so that preempts those.
Hollis, what is the least amount that has?
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now.
I think it's 263,000, the more I think about it, I think that's the right number. Because I did the calculations based on doubling. I'm trying to make, I want to make math simple here. I've been listening to your math here.
263.
I want to make the math simple. I wanted to double the amount of Chromebooks we had to cut the testing time in half. That was the position I took. And I think 63,000, it would probably be a little bit less than that to double the amount of Chromebooks.
You're right, 263.
So 263, so the suggestion would be to cut 200,000, leave 63 in the budget for Chromebooks to be added to the K-5 schools.
So are you looking to cart them out,
Yeah.
put them in carts?
Well, they knew this was, the principals knew this was coming because I had proposed this to them in an email last week, but we haven't talked about it. But it'll be something where they can be shared. These Chromebooks will not sit idle. They will not sit idle. And they will get used a lot. And we'll figure out the best way to deploy them in each situation. Sometimes it's, you have to remember too, Daryl, we can't leave carts in the hallway anymore.
Right. Yes, I was at that meeting.
You know, I think
Good thing I
if
wasn't.
I could add a piece here, I think one of the things that if I were a board member, I'd be a little concerned about right now would be if we're reducing by $200,000, we know that in a couple of years, the high school laptops will be up and we'll have to do something about those. And so that would mean then a really big
Right.
bite out of the potential apple at that point to put those back in there. But then I think it goes to Bill's conversation.
Goes to
Yes,
Bill's
that's exactly
conversation.
why I want to.
So something like that, what we're suggesting here, would buy the time for that, literally, figuratively, I don't know, symbolically, buy the time for that to occur and have something maybe in place that can help offset that increase.
I would support that. I think it's, that's kind of I feel like if we're spending our money efficiently, and if we can get through, I mean, this big SIPS thing is a kind of a
We
big
weren't expecting
pill
that.
to swallow in this environment, but I like to Stuart's point, I hate for every other program in the district to get wiped out because of the SIPS piece.
It's tough to
And this covers what we added this meeting. That's it. We're not even, it's not even that big of a dam.
shifting of funding.
Yeah.
And to your point, Kyle, we're looking at possibly wiping things out with a growing population, which makes it even more difficult to deal with, and it'll just get worse each year.
Yeah, and that's between the 150 and the 200, just that and that.
Got a little nudge in there,
That's right.
that's a
Exactly.
sizable dent.
As long as we don't spend anymore.
On everything else in.
As long as we keep Norm away from his email, we should be all right.
That's right. You can wipe it all out in one little thing.
So, it's not in there, where am I going, add probably on the proposed reductions tab?
Yeah, I would, you want me to make a note, or do you want to make a note?
I'm just,
I put it down at
I'm
the
just
bottom
gonna-
under like
under-
47 or something.
yeah, oops, get under there. So we are going to be, this is a reduction,
High school laptop lease payment,
Right.
reduced by $200,000.
with the understanding, and we haven't voted on this yet, but with the understanding that we're keeping in 63,000, which would be used for the purchase of Chromebooks
At the K-5.
at the K-5. So the reduction is just gonna be 200 with that 63, which doesn't show up on anywhere because it was in the budget, the big budget book.
So your reduction is 200,000.
Correct. That's an existing.
So, just so I'm clear, if we had purchased the high school, then the high school computers would go down to the younger kids, okay?
That's what the intention was.
That was the
yes.
intention.
Okay.
Yes, we were. Talk about dominoes, right? Our dominoes are smaller than those.
For what it's worth, from the high school perspective, I would totally support this plan. In fact, Dennis and I have been working quite a bit lately on exploring options, and I think this would actually buy some more time.
Yeah, and one of the options would fit well with Bill's concept. It would fit well.
So we'll task the policy committee into starting to research that.
So I think the administrative team will begin that, and then, yes, absolutely, policy and. Yep.
Put it on the list.
This is a new one, this isn't looking at an old one, this is a new policy.
Just about done.
Dennis is rolling his eyes, not this Dennis,
Previous Dennis?
yes, the previous Dennis. Alrighty,
He's still
so,
there, you know.
he's probably watching, hi Dennis, how you doing?
Are you gonna thumbs up that? or-
Yes, we're gonna have a straw poll on that, reduction of the high school laptop lease payment by $200,000. Okay. Thank you. And any other, again, any other items that are in the full budget that we wanted to have discussed? Any member of the school committee have something else to talk about before we start revisiting?
Oh, before we start revisiting.
Yeah, I want to try to get all the,
Okay.
before we start revisiting conversations we've already had, I want to make sure we have an opportunity to talk about anything else new.
I think I brought it up at the last meeting, but I think some of the components of the ALICE program, I think we could look into getting grants or asking the town council.
It's already gone.
That's gone.
It is gone.
That's out of SIPs. That was in
That was
SIPs.
in SIPs.
We didn't see any money, but.
But it may be something that we can,
Well, let's be clear, Alice is not gone.
right.
It's
It's all the communications piece and everything that was in the SIPs budget is gone.
Presents a challenge, we'll tackle it.
This is all the challenge. All right, so before we jump back, last chance. Okay. Let's go back to our proposed reductions. The one that I want to start with is we had a 3-3 on a reduction of the Village Elementary grade 4 second teacher. See, that's in yellow in our tab.
Yep, I was the missing vote.
Any, before we, before we
Start
have,
from scratch.
Yep,
Tie goes to the
just
runner.
any,
Yeah.
Oh, you gotta start over.
yes, just make sure any conversation, I think the things have stayed similar, except we've added more money on.
And just
The
so
yellow
you
one.
know, the budget proposal that you saw includes the addition of that third grade teacher. I treated that yellow as a green.
Fourth grade teacher.
Fourth grade.
Yeah, sorry, fourth grade teacher.
The second one.
Right, so I treated that yellow as a green, so in the proposed that you just saw, that summary, you've got both of those teachers being returned back to Village.
So fourth grade right now, Village, we're at
Yeah, you
17, 18, 18,
But hang
18.
on,
It's
it,
9.
but when you looked at it, it actually fell into the fifth grade and the fourth grade, because there's two positions there, one actually,
Would be moving to the one that we added back in, you see, that teacher is gonna be put into the fifth grade level.
Mhm.
right,
The one that's in yellow,
Would be,
it's not anywhere right now.
no, it is in there.
It is in
Fourth
the
grade.
It's in the fourth grade.
17,
That's the
18, 18, and
It's here.
18.
Oh, it's in this one.
Right.
So that would move the fourth grade to 71 divided by 3 is 27.
Right. Currently, we have 75, 76. We just had 2 new. So if we didn't get that, the third moving up would be at 25 class to start. It also is in the needs charts and those projected needs, it's the second highest next year, next to that fifth grade in terms of their,
So with those
There are
two
other needs.
positions, I put one in the fourth grade and one in the fifth grade. And that reduced your class sizes, because there's two positions listed on that line.
So it looks like it'd be 24s and 23s for the class sizes, which is the same as Narragansett and Great Falls is
For
correct.
fifth grade, are you talking fifth grade?
Fourth grade.
Fourth grade, if you did 71 divided by 3, it's
23
Well, Brian
points.
just
yeah,
said-
and that's not, that's, right now, we have 75. We just enrolled one today, and,
Okay.
so it's 76.
So that number's changed.
So we're at 25, 26.
Okay.
If you went to 3, that'd start out at 25, 26, right?
So I guess in, the question that I'll ask for the whole K-5 leadership is, just because it's going to come back in some of the other conversations, and it was a
Mhm.
question that was asked, because adding back a bunch of teachers is going to be tough budget-wise. The conversation that was had regarding adding ed tech, either to share or add 2 ed techs to help classes, I don't know how you want to.
So, I mean, we've done that in the past. When I first came here, we were experiencing increasing enrollments of 75 more students than we'd anticipated the year before. So we had some fun experiences there for my first couple of years in which we wound up not being, we had no idea that these kids were coming until they showed up in September. And so a couple of different times we had to add ed tech. I think once we added a teacher in the middle of a school year. So we've done those things. I will tell you that the ed techs, unless you can do a 1-for-1, meaning one ed tech for one classroom, it's very difficult to make a positive impact because they're just shared and split in too many different places. I remember the first year I was here, we had one, I mean, it was a stopgap measure because that's all we could do within the existing budget. I think we had one ed tech that was split between 3 or 4
It was-
classrooms.
It was that
Village.
second grade.
Which was better than nothing, but it was not much more.
New fifth grade.
So ed techs, I think if you're gonna consider ed techs, what you should consider is one ed tech for one classroom, if that's what you're looking to do, to reduce the actual workload on a classroom teacher, and to try to account for some of those impacts. Kathy?
I would just like to add, just realizing that when you do have an ed tech, there's a supervision portion that's
It's
added
added
on
to the teacher.
That does take time, that then time has to be carved out to work with that ed tech as well and supervise that they're doing everything that you need them to do
Right.
correctly.
It's not a one-for-one kind of thing. It is better than nothing,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a little more complicated.
I just got one quick follow-up. With that and talking about the spacings that we have with those class sizes and having 25, 26 students in the physical space, having an ed tech, another adult body in there.
It makes things more cramped, I mean,
It'd be
it's another
difficult.
person.
Plus, you look at where usually teams will work together on the core areas of ELA, for example, and math. So you have one subject going and you're trying to divide that person up, and it just gets difficult. It's just not an effective way to really help mitigate that. It does a bit, but
Kyle, that question.
So, a little historical perspective. 10 years or so ago, under different administration, to cut the budget every year, we eliminated teaching positions and added all ed tech positions. And what we ended up with was a lot of ed techs, not a lot of teachers. and it was not working very well. So, I mean, ed tech, you know, I'm sure ed techs are great, but they're not a classroom teacher, and they're there for support, not for necessarily the same responsibilities that teachers have. So, we made a decision to go the other way and maybe start adding teachers, and I don't think we ever got rid of any ed techs, but slowly the numbers went down as people left that weren't replaced. So I think as a school district, we had made that decision to not just hire ed techs to kind of fill teaching positions. Do you, Hollis, recall this?
I do recall that. I do recall that, yeah.
So I think that, you know, if we're gonna stay with what traditionally we've done in this district, then I think we need to look at adding teachers and not ed techs.
Any other questions, comments?
So I do have one more little piece of information, not that, so I've been kind of, I mean, it's not that I don't believe anyone, but, you know, I like to kind of talk to people in the community to see if there's any different ideas or what, and the feedback I was getting from community members is that fourth grade, third to fourth grade class is tough. You know, I mean, I believe you, but, you know, I think there's many people that have supported that and saying that are in the schools, and, you know, it's gonna be tough bringing them up through the middle school.
Yeah. If you, and Kyle, as a segue, again, those special needs charts, if you look at that, that is the second highest of the groupings. The first is that fifth grade we've talked about over and over again, and certainly that already has 5 slated for their 5 classrooms. But the next one right under that is the upcoming fourth. So if you overload it or begin it at 25 and 26, you're already looking at that. For example, social emotional learning need is 23% compared to an average of 20%, and that average is skewed by that fifth grade, which is 33%. So
Just to add a little context, though, you know, what I find is a little strange, and that I don't have a large historical background, but I do remember my first year here, and that was a kindergarten class. That fourth grade class was the kindergarten class. They just came out of the blue. They were coming out of the woodwork, and we literally had to patch with ed techs and patch in different things, and you wonder about the needs of those students and where they are now, and what they could have been if
Yes.
that hadn't happened. I'm
Yes.
kind of curious. But that is, and it's consistent across the board with that third grade going into fourth grade. It's not just Village, that's a difficult class at Narragansett, and it's a difficult class at the others as well, so it's just interesting.
And, you know, it's just like with the bubble class that are freshmen now, you know, you have to make adjustments every year. Things change, so.
I think another one of those bigger conversations that we maybe should look to having is reevaluating our class size guidelines. Because having a mid-range that nobody is comfortable with and that we can't, you know, that doesn't seem usable, doesn't really serve us a purpose.
Well, that's why there's an optimal category, I think. I mean, that optimal category is what people say they want. I mean, that's why it's called optimal. Yeah. But I would say.
Anytime we get to the mid-range discussions, it's always, that's too much.
Right, but
So-
remember as NESDEC, when NESDEC did their demographic study, what did they tell you? And this is absolute truth. If you target mid-range, you get optimal. If you target optimal, you get less than optimal. Because of the way that the shift in the population works across the buildings. You have to do that, right? So if you target the mid-range, you typically, with a little bit of adjusting, will get your optimal numbers, which is what's winding up happening here in the conversation.
My guess is that if there are parents who want their kids to go to a smaller class size, they have the option to transport their own child to another school.
No, not necessarily, no. We don't do intra-school transfers unless it's in the best interest of the student. And it's basically it's a mini version of a superintendent's agreement for students outside of the, so
Who's make, what, is that?
principals make that decision.
Principals make that
For the
decision. Okay, so
intro
a
school.
parent would
Yeah.
come and talk to you and,
Yeah, and it has to be pretty compelling evidence for us to do that, otherwise it sort of opens the floodgate to that school of choice thing. So we're very consistent in that, and it has to be a really compelling reason that services or supports can't be offered at that particular site in order for those changes to be made.
I just thought that I was hearing that we are gonna
Yeah.
have a
No,
hard
it's
time
good.
servicing some of the students because of the class sizes, and so that then would open that up as
If the
an
services
option
can't be
if the
provided.
services
It's,
can be
it's a good
provided.
question, it's a reasonable question.
They can go to a private school. There's never, I mean, they could, at their own expense.
Right,
Like
of
if
course.
someone feels like they're.
No, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that if a family was concerned about the class size, or they didn't feel like their needs were being met by that class size, we have other classes in the district that are smaller,
Yes.
that,
Going to a different
Yes.
school within
yes,
Gorham.
right.
So looking, just for an example, looking at what we have now, Narragansett, third grade, 25 students in 2 classes. At Great Falls, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 grades at 5 at 19 and 1 at 18. And this goes back to the conversation we had a couple years ago as to when we were looking at the disparity between our schools and the class sizes, and talked about the possibility of having new students coming in.
Right.
This
Come on,
year,
school.
we're gonna, you know what, this year, we're gonna have you go, because we have smaller class sizes, we're gonna have you go to Great Falls, because we don't have the capacity at Narragansett. But it opens up a whole can of worms. The superintendent and I have talked about this many a times.
Transportation, we should get that too. yeah.
Transportation and other issues as well, but the thing that the reason I keep coming back to that is to the point that we have capacity in some of our classes within our district, and we are over capacity in others. So trying to manage that. The issue of, well, this year they're gonna be at, say, Great Falls. This would be the year to have that conversation, because next year we're redrawing the lines. So there's a possibility that there's gonna be a lot of students moving anyway. So it's more of a conversation to have this year instead of what we had last year, because we weren't looking at moving any lines, because we were trying to keep the lines the same. So to your point in trying to find, well, where can we fit these kids so that we have good class sizes, logistically, it raises a bunch of issues that we have, but it's an option to discuss. If the school committee would like to have that discussion.
It's never gonna be perfect. I mean, you're never gonna get it all.
No, and I wouldn't want to direct it, I was just saying that it's an option it should be an option for parents to address that. I know when we were all prisoners of our experience, and when we didn't want our kids going to the middle school that was closest to ours, there was another middle school that was available, and other people in our neighborhood all thought the same, and we had a carpool plan, and we drove our kids to the other middle school when it was 25 minutes away, but that's what we wanted to do, and it was important to us. And the whole neighborhood banded together, and they carpooled their kids, and we did that for almost 3 years. And because that was our choice.
Not
So,
quite as simple, but yeah. The only reason I think that maybe, and I don't know what the circumstance was in that historical piece, but right now, I think the problem that we have is that we have 3 really great schools, and if we open things up, and capacity is an issue at all 3 of the schools, so it's not like, it's sort of windows of opportunity that exist. And what Daryl's describing in the 3rd grade, for example, that is, I mean, there's some space at Great Falls right now, but I don't know how long that lasts and how that works in terms of if you allow, what do you, create a lottery system? If you have more people that want to go to Great Falls than we have space for, I mean, that gets pretty complicated pretty fast.
You can set it up as a, you know what, set it out there, and it's a first come, first serve. If a parent wants to
Because you're only talking
do
about
that.
2 or 3 kids.
Right.
And we did do that. We did
Otherwise,
that.
Yes.
the class has gone the other way.
Right.
That was my son's kindergarten class.
We did that, but when we did that, we made the choice that we were opening that up, and therefore we promised transportation, okay? Which, that's what ripples across.
But to your point, Bill, if if I have a student in the third grade at Narragansett and class size is an issue, and I would like them to go to Great Falls because they would be in a smaller class, then I could provide,
If I was
then I would make the
concerned about my
decision
child
and I
in
would
high
provide the
school and
transportation.
class size, then I would be advocating for that for my child, absolutely.
Mhm.
No, I kind of thinking as a school committee.
And we did have to get a superintendent's agreement to do that,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
No, I just think as a school committee, we kind of probably need to consider, all of the students, and like, at RSU 5, I think recently they changed their policy to that K through 5, 19 students. That's it, because they are committed to the fact that they know smaller class sizes equals success down the line. So I don't know if it's just thinking about all of our students, and that's what's best for all of them, and not just, our particular children.
I don't have anybody in third grade. I was just using third grade because I was talking about it, so.
And I
it
do,
was
but
just a-
I also care about the other third grade students, I care about all of the
Right.
obviously I'm advocating for my child, but I'm advocating for all of the students, because I know, and it's actually 20, there's 26, 26 kids, I don't, yeah.
So remember, that's using NESDEC numbers.
Right.
That weren't
NASDAQ
full.
I was
It's
using
funny,
I was using the
moving
number that
on.
was in front of us. It's easier to follow.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the
to
chances
your-
are they're gonna go up, not down, I
Right.
mean.
They've
And
already-
to your point, Jen,
Right.
I'm advocating K-12. I'm not advocating any particular school, I'm not advocating any particular grade. I'm advocating K-12 and what's best for all of our students K-12, not just elementary. So, and that's why I brought that up, because there may be an opportunity for us to move things around in the elementary, which open things up and opportunities up for our kids in middle school or high school, or another elementary level or that way. That's the only reason that I bring it up, and it just, I've always wanted to try to, and it's very difficult to do, and it has been, is provide flexibility where there is none. We don't really have it. There might be little things that we can do that might benefit more students, because if you pull the students out of, say, 26 per class in the third grade at Narragansett, and you move them to Great Falls, you're affecting the two classes that are in Narragansett and those kids that are going over to Great Falls, because now they have smaller class sizes, so you're affecting more kids. I also understand the flip side of that you're adding more kids to the Great Falls. But one of the things that I struggle with is trying, and I know the acuity of need and all of that, and everything differs, but trying to get more equity throughout the district in everything that we talk about. And looking at, I spend a lot of time, and I have all the acuity and needs pieces. I put it in a spreadsheet so I can look at all 3 schools, each grade, for each category, so it's right there for me, and seeing where the issues are, it stands out pretty good. But just seeing that, trying to get some sort of flexibility in there to be able to provide that, I think would benefit more of our students, given the constraints that we're dealing with. I'm not saying it's the best issue. I'm just trying to be creative and trying to deal with the issues that we have with our constraints that we're looking at, and trying to think differently.
So are we talking about village teachers? Is that where we are on this?
Yeah,
this
it's right
report?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna straw poll this one again?
Yeah, do we have everybody?
And this was for one of the two, right? Because there's two.
Yeah,
one
the
already
other
in.
Oh,
we're
one
gonna-
already in, sorry, thank you, you split that.
And this one is
This
already added back into the budget, numbers-wise.
Correct. It is.
But we do have everybody here. So straw poll.
What does
Oh.
thumbs up mean?
So this is, you know what, thumbs up is, we want the position, thumbs down is, I think that's the easiest way
It is.
to do it, is that
Yeah.
word?
Pretty simple.
Okay, so 5-2. Not put back in because it's already in there.
Well, you want, yeah, 5-2 to keep it in, how's that?
Okay. That would be great.
That's a different color, Darryl.
And go green.
It's going green.
See?
Heather, I just need to be clear. I hadn't included that back into the budget summary, the dollars. I had only restored one of the positions into the budget summary, because I only picked the green ones off that list. So I left that one as a neutral vote. So I added one village
That would be an
teacher,
ad then.
so that will be an
I
ad.
thought we'd had an email correspondence back and forth where that was actually added back in.
I can go back and look, but I just double checked my numbers.
Okay.
So I added one of the two last week. So I'd have to add 85,000 in.
That would be an ad. I don't know if that changes it, but.
I just double checked the numbers to be sure.
And
And
thank
it's
you for
only-
correcting that now versus later.
And it is showing only one addition from the last meeting,
Right,
one village grade.
right. I treated it like it wasn't voted on because it was neutral.
Doesn't change it for me.
Does it change it for anybody?
Okay, so add back. Okay. Any other somebody would like to?
Yes.
Okay, Jen, which one would
I
you
would
like to?
like to add back in the Narragansett elementary teacher, grade 3.
Any
Is it
further?
okay to, sorry, is it okay to add comment or?
I want the school committee to have a conversation first.
First, we need 4 people to agree to bring it back in.
Correct.
I'll be the second person.
Okay, it's back on the table for discussion.
I will just say that I, in the last meeting, voted against it because I thought there was no space for it. I definitely see a need for it based on all the conversations we've had, and have heard people from the public strongly voice their concerns that a class of 26 students is not what we aim for in our school district, and like I said, only voted against it because I didn't think we had space, and I'm happy to hear that it seems like there is some space.
And I agree. The news that there is some space and
So if we add this classroom back, that means we'll be down to 16 students per third grade in Narragansett. Correct?
17 and 18.
Yeah, 'cause there's actually
Two classes of
26 in each of those.
17 and
So
one of
there's
18.
52, so there's two 17s and an 18.
I thought there was 50 in total.
Yeah, that's
There's
because
2 more.
There's the NESDEC numbers. What's listed there is NESDEC. The difference is existing bodies in a seat right now.
So the number's 52. That's what Jen was.
If you want me to, I could go back through and do all the additions for every classroom that has
No, I
had
don't need
changes
that. You
across.
just have to tell me what the real number is.
Two
I
17s
had to
and
use
an
a
18.
number in time, and then it's changed since then.
So it would drop it to 2 17s and an 18.
And we're looking at, the other schools are,
19.
5 19s and an 18 at Great Falls, and 1 19 and 2 20. This is the numbers that are in front of us on the revised sheet. I'm just.
The 113
those
for
will
Great
change.
Falls is accurate, the 59 at Village, I think, is accurate too.
So
Okay.
2 20s and a 19.
All right.
sure it won't be 17 and 18 very long.
Okay, just to rehash though, because I want to be clear about this. I used NESDEC projections, and then I used October 1 counts on all those numbers. So there are differences between that and bodies that are in their seats right now,
Okay.
okay?
Any further conversation or discussion?
So you want to add anything?
Cynthia, did you want to add something?
No, I think I'm just gonna. If I have any more questions.
She's reading the room.
I'm ready though, if you have questions.
All right, no further discussion. Poll? Thumbs up is to put it in. And the reason I'm voting down on both, were you a sideways?
No, I was up.
Okay, I saw you when you moved your hand, I was like, wait a minute, I thought you were up. Is because I think there's other ways we could deal with the staffing, not the staffing, but the student population.
Well,
So-
I'm supporting it because we gotta get through this and, really,
Oh,
at this point,
Yes.
we're not gonna haggle about $85,000 if we need the, we
Nope,
may-
I totally get it.
Right, so
Yep.
let's just get this wrapped
So,
up.
any
and
others that,
Move on.
yep, any others that, wants to be, so we're on the proposed reductions list. Is there anything else in there that somebody would like to revisit? Nope, you have about 3 seconds, of course. Because that is a rather long list. No, I don't want to rush these discussions.
I'd like to look at the K-5 SRO. I think especially with the reduced communications for the ALICE program, I think we could really benefit from having a separate school resource officer in the high school, one in the middle school, and then one in our K-5.
That's a good point, Margaret.
Okay. So is there 4 that would like to bring it back to the table? I have 3. Okay. So it's back on the table for discussion. Any additional discussion? Any additional comments, Stuart, or is that?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, we talk about what we can do to improve the security of our schools. We've had seen good impact from our school resource officers. Beyond putting money into capital improvement projects to make our schools more safe, the next best thing we can do is to have a decent level of resource officers in our buildings.
I agree, I'm concerned that the technology updates for Alice were not, I understand why not, but I'm concerned that they're not there, and that trying to keep safety of our students, administration, and staff, I think needs to be a significant priority, so I do support that.
Just for clarity's sake, that position would be just K through 5, so it would still be split between 3 schools. Right now, we have 1 school resource officer split between K-8, which is 4 schools, so that would still, it would definitely increase the
Yeah.
coverage, but I just don't want you to get the envision that it's 1 person per school.
No,
It would not be.
Nope, 1 for K-5 total and then 1 in the middle school.
I think it's important to recognize it's not just security, it's relationships. And we should all learn that from Pooch. That he was able to protect our schools by having great relationships with kids. So I can start there.
Okay.
So I was listening to Sawchuk, he's the new commissioner of public safety and the administration, okay? And he was talking specifically about SRO being in the schools, how, to your point, Chris, it's not just, what Chris was saying, it's relationship building and it's teaching, the younger, the better, is what it is. And I'm not sure that at some point there's not gonna be some kind of funding. He was kind of indicating that it's on the table. And so, I think that it's definitely, I was very disappointed that the emergency system is not gonna be part of this budget. I think it's, I don't know, I think it's really important, the communication piece of it, and also the SRO, but, there could be, down the line, an opportunity to get additional funding for this. Not this year, but, I support it. I feel like we have to put what we want in, and we're at the point now, the percentage of increase that we have to put in there what we want. And if we, get cut by the council, or then we'll have to have this other conversation. But if we look at how much we're spending on SIPs this year, if we can find another way of addressing that, then we would be able to have these things in our school operating budget. So, I'm supportive of it.
Okay.
I just have a question. Are the SROs Gorham police officers?
They are, yes. They're actually full-time employees of the Gorham Police Department. And we have a contracted service and a memorandum of understanding that allows them to work with us 10 months out of the year. The other 2 months, they work as PD officers.
that 65,000 is our portion of it.
That's our 2/3 portion, yes.
And we don't pick up the benefit, I mean, do we pay?
We pay 2/3 of the
Factored in,
cost
okay.
of the officer, which includes also training and other things that are required to have the officer, so it's 2/3 of the total cost.
And that officer could help with some of the Alice training and things like that?
Absolutely.
So it would set us up nice for next year if we can get some kind of mass communication. I don't know, what's out there, but we would be in a better position to implement something like that if we had kind of moved that project kind of to another level.
I think the relationship piece of it is key for me. I mean, I've been at a school before where the police have been called and they're coming because of an issue and not just because they're there working and creating positive relationships with students. So I think to see them in that situation and build that positive relationship would be great and with a different perspective on it, and definitely with the help with security and the Alice communication system processes.
I have a question. If we were to add this in any effect on the PD, do they have to hire additional, I don't know how that goes, because we're adding another police officer and then we're taking off their.
There would be an impact to the PD. Now, when I had these conversations with Chief Jones earlier in the year, he had proposed that he put his portion, because there's a portion associated, it's the other third, right? That he would have to put in his budget. Now, I know that since we had follow-up conversations, and I said that, well, this is not gonna go into my proposed budget, because it didn't go into my proposed budget. This was one of the reductions. He has since moved to looking for a full-time community liaison officer that would serve a portion of this purpose and be freed up a little bit, but not to the extent of this position. So I would have to reopen a conversation with Chief Jones to see if this is something he could still do, whether he would shift his thinking from the community officer to the school resource officer, or whether he would consider adding, because that would add a little bit more, add basically a full community liaison plus a portion of K-5 SRO, or whether it's off the table entirely at this point, because there is an implication here for the Gorham PD.
So I'm asking the school committee, because it's similar to the conversation we had a little earlier. Do we want to wait to see if it's an option before we vote? And because we already have something coming back to us next week under similar circumstances with the number regarding the portables. Before we vote, do we want to see, is it an option still? If that's off the table with the Gorham PD, we could vote it in, and Gorham PD is not going to put in their piece. How would the school committee like to move forward on that?
I'd be comfortable voting on it now, because for this item in particular, if we can't make it work with PD, then it just doesn't happen. Then we would have that as a reduction, we could take that out of the budget again. But I think going back to them and having a conversation without having support of the school committee, then again, we're getting a tentative commitment for the PD to bring back here. If we don't approve it again, then we're gonna go back to the police department and say, well, no, never mind, we don't actually wanna put this in. This doesn't seem to me like a negotiation item as far as, what we could get from a private company. I think if this is something that we wanna do, then we can vote on it, and if it doesn't work out, then it can come back out of the budget.
I'd like to hear from one or all of the elementary school teachers or principals as to the impact of it having an SRO or not. I mean, it's pretty low down on the requirement list, and we voted not to have teachers in the classrooms, which also obviously have an impact on students. So, what's your feeling on the impact of an SRO versus adding another teacher?
So currently, we have had to share our SRO, and our time with him has been very, very limited. So we have not been able to benefit from the relationship building or the in-class lessons or the presence, which is sorely missed We're all feeling it. Our teachers feel it, our parents ask about the presence or lack of presence. When there are issues or concerns, we can call and he will always arrive and someone always responds and we're able to handle it that way. But that relationship piece that Chris mentioned is absent right now because we don't have the time. The SRO is not present in our building on a regular basis, does not get to know the kids, which makes a huge difference. So from the perspective of Great Falls anyway, if you were to ask teachers, students, parents, not having that presence makes a big difference in our community. And there's a safety concern as well.
But I think your question was,
That's fine.
okay.
Right. I totally concur with Becky, and I think this year, for a myriad of factors, we just haven't had the presence even that we usually have, but it really goes down to that relationship building and their impacts within the classroom and what they can offer. As the students move up in the grades, they also, at least at Village, become more integral, and I think the goal is to have them throughout when we can, but into some of those deeper conversations in the student classrooms. Especially in 4th and 5th grade level around conflict resolution, some of the substance abuse work and so forth. So it's definitely missed this year, and I think that could only be enhanced by additional SRO supports.
I would only add, I feel almost like it's an impossible question to answer from my vantage point, given the full context of the conversation this evening. You know, we've had many conversations about, yes, it would be nice to have lots of things, but our priorities have been classroom teaching positions in those areas of significant need. If we felt we could get by with classes of 25 because the needs were not present, we would have advocated for that. So I don't know if guilt is the right word, but I feel a little bit guilty about continuing to ask for more when I know there's a limited funding pool. The relationship piece is a great potential. I guess that's the difficult choice that you all have to grapple with, is where you draw that line.
So any other comments by the school committee? Ready to straw poll?
Straw poll to,
Thumbs up is to put it back in, thumbs down is to keep it out.
what
SRO.
about the conversation about, I mean, the straw poll on whether we want to
Already had
wait
that.
until,
Oh,
wait
it's,
until we find out what kind of information we have, because it could go anyway. It could go, no, I'm not hiring anyone because I don't want to pay for a third, or I can't pay for third position, or we'll hire some, but it's 100% school, which
so
would
you want a
change
straw
the
poll
number.
before we do the straw poll of whether we do the straw poll, right?
Well, I kind of
Because
would
there's
like
two,
to find
there's
out
two,
whether it's.
we could go with, we can start with this one, because it's on there and it's the straight full thing. And then go through this, if there was wanted to be, if we wanted further discussion on it, then if there are 4 people, we could continue on this discussion with it.
I think if we're voting on the 65,000 to add this in, if we find out that the police department is no longer prepared to pay that additional third, then we need to discuss it again, because we either gotta pay more money or take it back out. But
Correct.
that's mine.
Perhaps they could just hire a 2/3 officer and we pay 100% of that 2/3 officer. Sometimes we hire part-time staff, we don't hire a full FTE. That might also be an option.
There's lots of options. The question is, do you want them in there?
So do we want to just vote with what's on there right now? Is that, we won't do a straw poll, just head nods?
Yes.
Okay, so thumbs up is to put the SRO, the K-5 SRO back into the budget. Thumbs down is to keep it out. Any others on the proposed reductions? Proposed additions? Besides the new module at least, we are not gonna have a further conversation on that one, but any others is open.
Ask a question about, on the questions that we had, somebody had asked a question about the current fund balance, that it's currently 1%. Is there a way that we could do 3%? Would that help our budget at all?
You can
or-
do all kinds of things if you'd like. It might
I
be
think the-
helpful to have a good understanding of our fund balance. So Hollis, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
I was gonna
That's all we talked about last year, about working it down a little bit.
Well,
So
the
how-
issue that, and Hollis, correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
the issue that we have with the fund balance is, every year, at the end of the year, we have our fund balance, leftover money that wasn't spent for whatever reasons. Those numbers, the amount of money at the end of each year has been going down. We've added in $350,000 for the last few budgets because previous school committees didn't want to see the revenue numbers going from, oh, we'll do 100,000, we'll do 350, we'll do 100,000 again, because you're seeing an increase in revenue of 250, decrease in revenue of 250. So we just said, you know what, based on what we're doing, what we're getting for fund balance, where we're at, we kind of started on the 350 level and kept it going that way. The issue we're running into is the last couple years, or was it just last year?
Last year,
was the first year.
last year
We
was.
started eating
Last year.
into the actual fund balance that we have. So we put in more money than we actually had from fund balance, so our overall fund balance decreased. We're expecting that to continue going forward. We're not gonna be able to build that up because we're kind of budgeting a heck of a lot closer to the numbers where we are actually budgeted, or expending the numbers really close to where they were actually budgeted. So anything we take out of the fund balance will most likely not be replenished. Our accountants and our auditors recommend that we keep and maintain at least a 3% fund balance. So what we run into is if we continue to use that and our budget continues to go up, we're gonna be at a point where it's gonna be a finding on the audit, we're below that 3% recommended value for our fund balance.
Yeah,
Did
I
I-
think, yeah, no, you did a good job at explaining that. And it is a complicated explanation, and I think the easiest way that I can explain it is when you're using fund balance as a revenue source, you're basically assuming on the first day of the fiscal year that you're not going to have enough revenue to cover your expenditures for that upcoming year. So you're in essence using your kid's savings account to pay your CMP bill, if you think of it in your home life, right? So right off the bat, we know July 1st, the first day of the fiscal year, we're already in a deficit position. The only way to come even to a zero, to a net zero, if we spent exactly what we budgeted, or if we, not even, I mean, we would have to save $350,000 or whatever the amount is that we apply as fund balance to even break even. That's not something that I would recommend that a $40 million organization aims to do. I think you should try to at least stay within the auditor's recommendation of a minimum of 3%. I think we're now in a climate where it's very difficult to grow fund balance. We used to have other funding sources available that just aren't there anymore. And so we have to be very careful because the ability to grow fund balance is very difficult. The ability to use fund balance is really easy. So we want to make sure that whatever we're using, it's reasonable to assume that we can restore it. So
And my
I would be
explanation-
very, very cautious with fund balance.
My explanation came from Hollis, because her and I have had this conversation many times. and
Yeah.
An updated one earlier this evening, so
Yeah,
thank you, Hollis.
yeah. Well, it's been complicated a little bit more recently,
What's
so.
this part of on the questions, it says we risk non-compliance with state law, potential loss of state subsidy?
Yeah.
How does that,
So,
does the state expect us to have a certain amount, or?
so the 3% is their recommendation, is the auditor's recommendation based on the state's guidance. So what they're saying is you want to make sure you don't go too far. If we were not a municipal unit, if we were
RSU.
an RSU, that didn't have the municipality's cash flow to ride on, we'd be in trouble with only having 3%. We're not in trouble because we're part of a municipality. But the guidance is there to keep us in a good position. So we want to make sure we follow that guidance.
Thank you, Hollis.
You're welcome. Always clear as mud on that conversation. But I really, if that doesn't make sense or people still have questions, don't be bashful to ask. I can try answering it in different ways to make it kind of click. It's one of those subjects, it might take the third explanation and you go, I get it.
It's like explaining the 279.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what would be the difference? Like right now we're at 4%. What would 3% look like if we were at 3%?
I think it's $310,000.
Yeah, you did that math earlier, didn't you? I won't even redo it.
Ish would drop us, but dropping us to 3% this year means we'll be under 3% next year. Correct. That's what, and
Yeah,
I put this in
2 years
here and
ago.
looking at that and wanted that, I needed to have a refresher in doing that and doing
And that's
this.
because we're spending, when we budget, we're actually spending over the budget?
Nope, we're borrowing from that fund balance because we don't want to spend the $350,000. We're saying, okay, here's our savings account. We're going to take $350,000. We're going to pay our utilities, and we're going to start off with $350,000 because we know that we're going to need it, and this is going to help us get through the year.
Okay.
It's helpful to think of the savings account, the CMP thing. That really is the case. It's just on a much grander scale.
Yeah.
And in the past, when we did it, is we were fine with doing that because we know we're going to put the $350 in July 1, and at June 30, we're going to have at least that $350 to replenish back into the savings account. That's just not the case anymore.
So right now we budgeted 350 in our,
Nope, we
No,
budgeted 100.
we put it down to 100,000 because we knew we were eating into the fund balance.
Correct. And that was a more comfortable number, if my understanding from our conversations is more comfortable number that will probably be around where we'll finish.
Be close.
But it's always a total guess.
Because that's kind of the last amount of money that we spend, right?
Yes.
So there's the possibility we don't end up using it, but we're pretty close to in our budgets.
Correct. And to Hollis's point, when we had other funding that we were able to move around, it's like, oh, okay, we're able to use this funding, so it didn't come out of the general fund. So there was a lot more pieces that we could use that are no longer available to us, which is another reason why it's kind of closer to the line.
Right, and just to give you some context, and I swear I'll stop.
Yes,
Last year, we had $200,000 in surplus in our budgetary accounts. So we spent $200,000 less than we planned to spend. We received additional money for state funding from DOE. We still went upside down and had to borrow out of fund balance to pay our bills because that $350,000 hole was there to begin with. So we would have had to have had a surplus of that amount between excess revenue and surplus expenditures to not dip into fund balance. So we can manage our budgets very well throughout the course of the year, and we can come in with a surplus balance at the end of the year, and we can still overspend. So you have to look at the revenues and the expenditures at the same time. It's not just one or the other. Thank you. Now I'm done.
Chris, take care of it.
That's a good one.
Any other questions on fund balance? All right. So was there any other items on the proposed addition list that we wanted to talk about? Okay, sorry, I'm trying to get back to work. Are we seriously going to be done at 9 o'clock?
I think you might be. I mean, at this point anyway, I think what I can do is take the changes that have been discussed tonight and put them into the budget summary again, so you can see a holistic picture of the implications. And I suspect then that we'll probably be one more conversation next Monday night, and then you'll be wrapped up and ready to go. That's what I would say.
That's what I would expect. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.